the big question mark in my head is, how do the fading empires of the West respond to this growth? And that's a question I have a difficulty with. My sense is that Americans in the American empire will recognize the benefit of not going quietly into the night, but of accepting that the world's changing, that the role of the American empire is, if not over, certainly much changed than it had been, and that hopefully and ideally they'll recognize that in fact the American Revolution is furthered by an expansion from China and India. If that goes on, I'm not sure the turmoil you seem to be concerned about is likely to show up. I'll pass that back to you.
There's been an immense bubble that has developed in China over the years, especially in real estate. And I think the consequences of that bubble are going to be the same in China as they are in the United States. In other words, lots of people that have put their life savings into property are going to wind up losing it. The banks that have financed this, it's not been as bad, as serious as it is in the U.S., are going to wind up going bankrupt. The Chinese are going to wind up destroying their currency or coming close to it. And you could have major turmoil in China. And one of the things that they really have to worry about is they're sitting on 2 trillion foreign currency units. Most of them are U.S. dollars. And they understand, they've got to understand that those dollars are really just hot potatoes. They're IOU nothings from a bankrupt government. Of course, I've suggested, I've advocated that the U.S. government default on its debt for years. It'll never be paid back, and it should be defaulted on honestly as opposed to dishonestly, such as it were, through inflation, because it serves as an albatross around the neck of generations of Americans yet to come, who in no way will benefit from that debt. But that's going to happen. It can never be repaid. It's not going to be repaid, so it will be defaulted on one way or another, and the Chinese are going to be damaged in a major way from that, whether it happens overtly by actual default or covertly through inflation. But as far as how to react about this from a speculative point of view, I only like to do something when I feel the odds are heavily in my favor. We never know for sure if we're going to be right or wrong, so I try not to act unless I subjectively feel very confident that I'm right, and if I'm right, I'm going to get a multiple return on my money to make up for the chances when I'm wrong on things. And right now, there are very few opportunities out there. One of the ones I like best, although I'm a lot less friendly towards gold at $12.50 than I was at $2.50, and the same for the mining stocks, I still think they're the best place to be. As far as how this all is going to work out in the future, I think that the long-term future, I think that the distant long-term is not only going to be better than we can imagine, but better than we can imagine. But I think we've got to go through a very serious time of reckoning over the next 5 or 10 years. It might even be longer than that, where all the distortions and misallocations of capital that have been caused by government intervention in the economy, inflation, taxes, regulation, have got to be winnowed out. And patterns of production and consumption, which are proving to be unsustainable, are going to have to be totally reoriented. There's going to be, all over the world, hundreds of millions of people that are working at jobs which are no longer sustainable, that are going to have to find new lines of work. It's going to be a big, big shift in the world economy the way I see it, much bigger than most people imagine at this point. We'll see if I'm right or wrong in the next couple of years, Dave.
I certainly agree that we're in a period where there will be major changes, but that's been happening for a while. Of course, people are going to have to change their employment. That's been ongoing for the last 300 years. That's part of the whole revolution that was started in Europe and has expanded and so far being best exemplified by the U.S. So, yes, of course that will happen. The question is, does that need to be chaotic? I think the other important point is, in terms of how societies function and economies function alongside them, is we're in a period when we can communicate much more richly and much more quickly than has even been imaginable until 20 years ago. Within that, I don't see any reason why Asia, why East and West can't meet and sort out their problems. As far as China's $2 billion of foreign currencies, for the time being, they can continue to spend it on things like oil that they need from offshore. If that changes, and you're right, there's a catastrophic crash in those currencies, that'll mean that the yuan is going up, and they'll be able to exchange fewer yuan for the same amount of oil or whatever else they need to bring in to maintain that growth. So I don't see that as an issue per se. That said, if gold is the answer, they're now the largest gold producer in the world too, and they'll just pick that up, I suppose. I'll pass it back to you with that.
I think that it understates the case to say that what we're looking at now is just really a continuation of what's been going on over the last 200 and some years since the Industrial Revolution, which was the last really major change that has happened from a world historic point of view, if you wish, the Industrial Revolution. I think that one of the things that distinguish the problems that we have today is, in fact, the huge amount of debt that is in the world today. Some people, it's not just a question of we owing it to ourselves, as it were, but some people owe that debt to somebody else. If you're going to pay that debt back, it's going to significantly reduce the standard of living of the borrower. And if it's not paid back, it's going to significantly reduce the standard of living of the lender. And I'm just saying that something is going to happen, and the amount of debt is so great on all levels, nationally and individually, going down to mortgages and credit cards on an individual basis, that I think we're looking at a real upheaval here. And I think that it's an international thing. The bubble has broken in the U.S. It's broken in Europe. It's breaking in China. It's going to break in Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I was just in Thailand for the last few weeks, and it's going to break there too. And I'm not sure what the consequences of it are going to be, socially and otherwise. But I don't think that we can consider this just to be another recession, another bump in the road, like all the others have been since the end of World War II. I think this is a major change. And even from a technological point of view, you mentioned the Internet and how this has changed things and the ability to communicate. You're absolutely correct on that. One of the things that the Internet's going to do, actually, is help overthrow the current political situation around the world. People with the Internet are now able to find that their real countrymen, the people that they actually share things that are important to them with, are not people that are just in the geographical situs of their country. It's around the world. They find that Americans are finding that their real loyalty isn't to other Americans. It's to people that could be in the Congo or Brazil or something that they share values with, not just a common government passport. And this is very subversive for the current political order. And you've got to remember also that these currencies are just artificial constructs created out of thin air by these governments. And all these governments all around the world are bankrupt today. Bankrupt. Not only bankrupt from an asset balance sheet point of view, but from an income point of view. The situation is getting worse, not getting better, and I see no way around, no way to turn the situation around. That's why, despite the fact I'm not crazy about gold at $12.50, it's the best thing out there that I can think of, by far.
Well, right now it's probably the best thing I can think of, too. I don't think there's much question of that, and I suspect our main differences of opinion. There's very little you said that I disagree with. I do think the one important point to keep in mind is that fiat currencies function effectively as an accounting service. They represent stores of wealth which are meant to be the engines that underlie them, the economic engines. The question, I suppose, is whether we get to continue with our basic quality of life, or whether we need to see a major upheaval. I actually think we've reached a point in human evolution that will continue fairly well. We've got a few minutes left. There's a few questions that have been popping up, some for Doug, some for myself. I'm going to answer one of those because I think it is a good point. It's a question about China bringing in pollution, etc. measures and what impact that might have on the economy. I've been expecting that to happen. If they don't do this, they'll have a social revolution. It is changing how the economy functions, but perhaps ironically, to some degree, it means that the green economy, some others would like to see evolve in the world. It could evolve that much more quickly in China, in no small measure because it has to. I don't know, is there a question there that you particularly like to answer, Doug?
Oddly enough, the questions haven't appeared to me, but I think that your comment about China and pollution is well taken. I'm not too worried about pollution in the long run, the simple reason being that pollution is uneconomic. It simply means that some chemicals or some forms of energy are going places where they're not needed or wanted. Pollution is wasteful. And as the world becomes more efficient, and the nature of technology is to make things more efficient and to use things more completely, simple advances in technology will solve the pollution problem. And many things that are considered pollutants today will actually become resources in the future. So I think it's a serious problem, but it's one that the markets will solve for reasons of their own in the years to come. So I'm not as worried about it as other people are, although in China in particular, it's a very obstreperous problem.
Okay, I think we're getting close to the close here. I hope the audience has gotten something out of it. Unfortunately, Doug and I have a hard time getting into a dust-up. We're much happier with a pair of cigars and glasses of wine going through our disagreements. So, but I do think the points you're hearing are important. They're well made. I'd certainly like to thank Kitco for giving me the opportunity to do this. I'm also asked to remind people who may have been looking at an HRA subscription. We do have a booth here, but also for people local to Vancouver, where I'm sitting right now, there will be a subscriber session. So anybody who's considering such subscription could possibly sign up and attend that. It's this coming Wednesday. I'll pass that back to Doug for his thoughts on Casey research.
Well, we always welcome more subscribers, and of course, in our publications, we've always had a strong emphasis on the metals and mining stocks, but we try to cover the whole world as well. I mean, I was in Iraq last month, was in Cambodia this month, supposed to go to Ethiopia at the end of next month, and I like to do country studies of these places, and I like to look at rather outlandish opportunities in all of them when I go there. So I guess that's the plug for what we do in our publications, and thank you very much for being here from both Dave and I, and I'll be watching this tomorrow myself.